For those of you who don't know, I don't like predators. I don't like predatory people. I don't like people who, take advantage of others and exploit them. And the person I'm talking about today is Darrin, which I talk about him a lot on my channel. If you don't know who Darrin is, well, I wrote something. Let's see right here. I wrote something on him, and it's 4 pages long, and I would like to read it to you because I feel like this is a little bit more concise, and it's sort of my thought. It's my thought because I wrote it and I put it on paper, and I just want to read it to you guys. So then you can formulate based on past experiences. Alright, so let's just get into this. What was that? Alright, let's just get into this. Darrin Ammons is polite, friendly, and likable. Are most likely the words used to describe Darrin by his colleagues who know him. His wife might describe him as a good provider, providing a stable home for her and their son. His son might describe him as cunning, entitled, exploitative, lazy, arrogant, a pathological liar that lacks empathy. There are two sides to every coin, but this metaphor doesn't fit for people because people are far more complex. Darrin and his son were never really close as his son grew up. His son was far closer to his mother and Darrin's wife. As their son grew up, even though he wasn't close to his father, he loved his father, but as he started to grow up, their relationship became increasingly estranged. Their estrangement could be attributed to a few factors. Attributed to their son was protective of his mother and her dog. His father, for the most part, was cold and dismissive. And when he wasn't cold and dismissive, he was passive-aggressive, mostly manipulative, and a bully. Darrin and his wife's son grew up with bullies around him. Darrin and his wife's son grew up with bullies around him, slowly contributing to his thick skin, sharp tongue, and his contempt for people who would seek to prey upon others. Alright. 2018 was the worst year of Darrin's son's life, and their chance of having a fulfilling father-son relationship. And a nail in a coffin for their father-son relationship. For the first half of the year, his son was having trouble in college classes until he made the call not to pursue college and dropped out. After his decision, he started looking for a sustainable income source. He already had a part-time job in retail with limited hours, so he was looking for a full-time job or a second part-time job that could offer more hours. He filled out tons of applications with only a few interviews, but nothing came of them until a family friend stepped in with a job at a restaurant where she worked as a kitchen manager and told him to apply for a busser position. He would get the job if the interview went well. She was right, and it went well, and he got the job. Although it was a very stressful job at first, towards the end of 2018, that is when everything in his son's life started to collapse around him. His son and his mother had a cat who was let out on a Saturday night, and she never came back, which set off the chain of events. When they found her lifeless body, it was clear that something had attacked and killed her. Darrin's wife was and still is a peaceful person and let live and let live person. So while she grieved, she did not grieve as long as her son. Her son wanted blood atonement for the life of his beloved pet, who he considered to be more than just a pet, but another member of the family. Darrin couldn't have cared less if he tried to. Not only was he dismissive, he mocked and made light of his son's grief, mostly when others were around, like family friends. After the death of a beloved family member, it was the nail in the coffin for their son's contempt for predatory animals and humans alike. From that moment on, their son researched and got his hunting license and trapper permit. 2019, Darrin became increasingly more and more toxic. His toxic traits were on hyperdrive. His cunningness, entitlement, exploitativeness, arrogance, and a lack of empathy. In 2019, long-term family friend of the Ammons family were going through marriage troubles, and eventually they came to a decision to end their marriage. These family friends go way back with Darrin, and they grew up together and stayed friends through the years. Darrin got bored, so to shake things up in his life, he started moving in on his friend. It started out with nights out under the guise that he was just being a good friend and needed to be there for her. But this play went on for a little too long. There is no telling what Darrin said or did to seduce his friend, but he played on her fragile emotional state. He exploited his friend's raw emotions. He also cunningly told his wife he needed to be there for his friends in her time of emotional need. Darrin, at some point during his affair with his friend, asked his wife for a divorce. Instead of going through the process of filing for a divorce like he asked for, his wife asked to go to couples counseling to try and save the marriage. He only went for a couple of times before they both stopped going. While they were going, he stopped seeing his friend, but he got bored with that, and instead of asking for a divorce again, he just started the affair back up again, putting the decision on his wife to file for a divorce. A thing about Darrin's wife is that she is a person who would never do that. She desperately wanted to stay with him, no matter what. She is a selfless person who puts others first and will let others dictate what happens to her life, even at the sacrifice of her own mental and emotional well-being. Darrin was aware of this fact as long as he never went too far down the rabbit hole. When questioned by his wife, he could keep her from pulling the trigger and calling it quits. The only thing he didn't plan on was his son getting involved, talking to his mother, telling her that he will keep doing what he is doing because he simply doesn't care because he's entitled and arrogant. He didn't plan on his son's blunt honesty and the level of contempt he had for him and people like him. Once Darrin figured out that someone had caught on to his emotional manipulation and cruel games he was playing, he knew he had to act fast before his wife started to take her son seriously and considered what he was saying. Darrin took many steps to isolate his wife from her son. At first, it was the small things. He told his wife to tell their son to confine himself to his room whenever Darrin was around. This went on for months. Whenever Darrin was around, every day their son would stay in his room for hours unless he had to work. When he was confined to his room, he only came out to get food or to use the restroom. Then he went back to his room. He did everything to isolate his wife by way of gaslighting and lying to her about her son's intentions, saying the only reason he was saying hurtful things was because he hated him and he doesn't know why his son hates him so much, and he would like to know. Eventually, she took it upon herself to set up an appointment at a family counselor's office. It was very clear to their son at the first session with the counselor that the counselor was only there to make a quick and easy buck and push her religious fundamentalism on her clients. When they went back the second time, Darrin took the whole session to passive-aggressively insult his son's maturity level until his son was angry enough to respond, saying the whole session was pointless. At that point, the counselor asked their son to leave the room so she could talk with his parents. 30 minutes later, while their son was in the waiting room, Darrin came out of the office looking very smug, followed by his wife. Fast forward a few weeks later, they kicked their son out of the house. A few months later, their son posted an in-depth video about his father online to expose his father and his cruel manipulations and his abhorrent ways of treating his wife and people he considered him a friend. After the video, while there was no real damage done, Darrin got spooked. So before he was made to answer for his atrocious ways of treating his wife, child, and friends, he started looking for new work outside of the state of Ohio, so he could move and avoid the social implications and repercussions for his actions. He eventually found work in Texas, so he could start over and avoid his son's influences on his mother. Darrin on the surface presents himself as a polite and friendly and likable man, but behind closed doors he is a cunning, entitled, exploitative, and arrogant man who lacks empathy, who sees people as his playthings that he can manipulate and toy with their emotions. When he gets bored and when presented with any sort of scrutiny, he would do anything to avoid repercussions that follow. And that's basically him in a nutshell. That's basically how Darrin, acts when, that's Darrin in a nutshell. That's who he is as a person. That's his character trait. That's who he is. There will be literally nothing pretty much anyone can do. He could go to therapy, like a real therapy, not that bullshit with the Pathways Christian bullshit, because they're not an actual therapist's office. They're just a place to push religious fundamentalism and their ideologies, which is, mainly the reason we went there. It was fucking bullshit. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you see him anywhere, I would recommend not getting too close to him, because he will do the same thing. I'm not saying if he gets bored again. I know he'll get bored again. I know he will continue doing the same things to different women, no matter what. He will assess them to be, emotionally vulnerable, if they are emotionally vulnerable or not, and if they present as emotionally vulnerable and easily manipulated, he will take that risk. He will take that for granted. he will take advantage of that. He will take advantage of those human traits to get to, probably for like a one-night stand, most likely. Or, for, maybe a couple weeks, maybe months. Like, it's not that he just got bored after 30 years. It's that he's probably been bored probably after a year. And then he probably did some stuff behind the scenes. Now, I am guessing at this point, but living with him for 20 years, just seeing little bits and signs of who he is as a person, you can make an assumption. You can make a pretty accurate assumption on who he is as a person and what he is doing and what he's capable of doing. Because I know this was not a one-off thing with just a friend that he liked, which, honestly, if he actually liked her for years, and they were so close, he would have chose her over my mother. I would have never existed if he actually cared for my friend. I'm saying that she is my friend and his friend. So I am definitely titling this "Don't Trust Darrin," because this is a person who will manipulate and discard people easily. And emotionally vulnerable people, like, that will wreck them. That will wreck them all over again. That will set them back. He is a person who will set people back. Emotionally unstable people, he will set them back. And I don't want to... knowing that I could, at least tell people about him and educate people about him as a person, I'm going to do that. So, if you get anything out of this video, do not trust Darrin Ammons. Do not trust this man.